All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the incredibly atmospheric, gritty world of the Dead Drop Prophet. We're going to explore this really moody city landscape and unpack a chilling, totally mind-bending concept: what actually happens when the future is perfectly, flawlessly predictable. Now, to truly get a feel for this story, we first have to understand the setting. The source text establishes a distinctly noir tone right out of the gate, describing a city where the past and future just weigh so heavily on the people living there. The text literally says the city remembered everything that should have been forgotten. It's one of those places where secrets don't just vanish, They kind of hide in the architecture, just waiting to be dug up. And in this particular city, what's being dug up are pieces of paper that hold absolutely impossible truths. So this brings us right to the central paradox of the whole thing. What if the future is already written? We're essentially looking at the age-old philosophical battle of determinism versus free will, but it's playing out in a gritty detective thriller. I mean, think about it. If a random piece of paper can tell you exactly what you're going to do tomorrow, do you actually have a choice in doing it? And that brings us to the macroscopic impossibility of this whole mystery. 100%. That is the accuracy rate of the prophet over 20 years of predictions. Not a single error. No partial truths. We are talking about dozens of highly specific, localized events, things like murders, accidents, betrayals, all predicted with absolute terrifying perfection. Section 1. 20 years of perfect predictions. Let's peel back the first layer of our mystery and look at the physical evidence left behind. Enter our protagonist, Detective Ora Vasquez. Now, Ora is the absolute perfect foil for an impossible mystery because she essentially embodies certainty. As a detective, she's totally built for action and gathering information. She solves things definitively, like the Marcus Fell murder, which, by the way, was perfectly predicted 3 days before he was actually found in the Selle River. Ora doesn't like the unknown. She likes answers. And she is about to go head-to-head with something that defies all logic. So Oprah begins by cataloging the prophet's ritualistic trademarks. For 2 decades, 47 confirmed dead drops have completely baffled the police, but they all shared this identical, ritualistic physical signature. We're talking cream-colored paper, blue ballpoint ink, folded precisely 3 times into a rectangle about the size of a playing card, and they are always hidden in public infrastructure, maybe the base of a lamppost, a gap in a brick wall, or the lip of a stone fountain. The prophet is calm, incredibly methodical, and completely untraceable. Section 2, the architecture of prophecy. How do these predictions actually work? Through a man named Vael, who has been quietly translating this massive document left by the prophet, we learn an incredible concept called determination density. The idea here is that the prophet isn't necessarily seeing the future like gazing into a crystal ball. Instead, it's more like, some events have so many causes already in motion, so many tiny decisions aligning to point toward a single outcome, that they create a sort of gravitational pull. They become highly determined, and because they're so deeply determined, they become legible in the present. It's almost like the future is already written by the sheer density of our current choices. But there is a catch. Meet former detective Claudette Reyes. She represents a concept called stillness. Reyes studied the only 2 predictions in 20 years that actually failed. And why did they fail? Because the people who found those predictions chose radical non-intervention. They didn't try to stop the event, but they didn't try to fulfill it either. They just sat with the information and did nothing. They maintained stillness, which basically dropped the determination density just enough to break the prediction. And this brilliantly illustrates Reyes's underlying philosophy, which is driven by a concept called the specious present. For you and me, now is just a tiny, fleeting sliver of a second, right? But what if a consciousness, or a mechanism, had a vastly wider present, a window of now that actually encompassed years? To the prophet's mechanism, highly determined future events aren't the future at all. They're just part of a massive, stretched-out present. It's simply reporting on what it's already observing. Section 3, the paradox of certainty. Let's see how this builds into a deeply personal psychological threat for Detective Vasquez. The mechanism doesn't just predict crimes for Ora to solve, it actually predicts her. Ora finds a dead drop that reveals a terrifying paradox. In 3 weeks, she is going to betray Solomon Vael to a rogue agency. And you know what the chilling part is? She won't do it out of malice. She'll do it out of her defining trait, certainty. She'll do it because she will be absolutely 100% sure that it's the right and virtuous thing to do to solve the case. Her greatest strength is literally the exact mechanism of her downfall. You can really feel the tension ramp up as we count down the days to Ora's highly determined betrayal. At 21 days out, she finds the prediction of her own crime. As she investigates, pulling at threads and gathering information just like she always does, the clock is ticking down. By day 11, she finds another dead drop at the fountain. By day 8, she realizes the antagonist, Callum Rast, is closing in. It's like every single step she takes to try and stop the prediction just pushes her closer to actually fulfilling it. Section 4, the rogue agency threat. Let's look at the external stakes here. Because it's not just Ora's soul on the line. There are massive, shadowy forces looking to exploit this impossible knowledge. Let me introduce you to the antagonist, Callum Rast. He works for the Interagency Analytical Division, which is this dark money organization operating in the gaps between federal oversight. Rast is the highly dangerous embodiment of utility. To him, a 100% accurate predictive mechanism isn't some philosophical marvel, it's an intelligence tool. To him, it's a weapon. There is such a stark contrast between these two forces. Callum Rast's background is in applied forecasting. He represents exploitation, control, and this intense desire to task the future, to basically force the prophet to answer his questions. But the actual reality of the prophet, Irene Voss, represents something else entirely. For her, it's not about power at all. It's a profound burden of terror. She merely transcribes what the universe entrusts to her. So there's this fundamental misunderstanding that the rogue agency has regarding the nature of the prophecy. While the IAD wants the function to be a perfectly controllable intelligence tool, the reality is that it's a mechanism of care, dropping warnings where human choice might still actually make a difference. The IAD wants to task the operation. The reality is that it's completely uncontrollable. They see the prophet as a useful asset, while the real truth is that she is simply an entrusted vessel, just a channel for the river of time. Section 5, the tired postman. Finally, let's zoom all the way into the microscopic human truth at the very center of this massive mystery. Who is actually folding these papers? Well, the grand, mysterious prophet is not a mastermind criminal or some shadowy syndicate. It is Irene Voss, an exhausted 81-year-old woman living in a very modest fourth-floor apartment. She represents pure burden. For 20 whole years, she's woken up with knowledge of the future just pressed into her mind, and she's simply written it down, folded it 3 times, and walked into the city to deliver it. She isn't the author of destiny, she's really just its tired postman. And this brings us to one of the absolute most poignant lines in the entire story. The carrier is tired. The carrier would like to be found. You see, Irene intentionally orchestrated the prediction about Ora. She didn't do it to doom the detective. She did it because she realizes her time as the aperture for this mechanism is coming to an end. She placed the clues directly in Ora's path because she is finally ready to pass the baton. She is ready to be found. This ultimately forces Ora to make a final, absolutely brilliant character shift. First, she has to act against her very nature. She literally stops gathering information just for the sake of acting on it. Second, she embraces Claudette Reyes' philosophy of stillness. She allows herself to just be with the unknown. And finally, rather than turning the prophet over to the rogue agency to satisfy her own need for certainty, she steps up to protect Irene Voss. By abandoning her dangerous certainty, Ora breaks the determination density of her own predicted betrayal. Which leaves us with this profound final question to wrap up our explainer today. If an event is 100% predictable, do you still have a choice? The story of the dead drop prophet suggests that you do, but only if you're willing to completely change the person you are, right down to your core. Only by abandoning your certainties can you change a highly determined future. So, think about that for a second. What certainties are shaping your future right now? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.